Where does the transfiguration fit into God's grand plan of salvation? Ever wondered that, ever thought about that? It's an important day. We dedicate a Sunday or a weekend to it every year. But where is it in everything that God did for us and for our salvation? Because as important as it is, I don't think I've ever given somebody a simplified explanation of the message of Scripture and also talked about the Transfiguration. I don't think I've ever sat down and given a simplified presentation on the law and gospel where I've talked about the things that Jesus did, like the birth of Jesus and the death and the resurrection, but I've never mentioned the Transfiguration. And it doesn't come up in our creeds either, at least not the ones we speak in church. Our creeds, we talk about the events of Jesus' life, conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, died, rose, ascended even, but we don't mention the Transfiguration. And so we might be tempted to think that it is of very little consequence, that it's a sort of take it or leave it event. It's very cool that it happened, but not really important that it did. But if we take a moment to look a little closer, or maybe even to pull back a little bit and see the Transfiguration, and see it especially in the context of the things that were about to happen. After all, Moses and Elijah were talking with Jesus at the Transfiguration about the things that were about to happen. If we do that, we see with quite a bit more clarity what it means for our salvation and what it means as we make our way to our heavenly home. But to understand this better, we need to backtrack a little bit, and we go back to our Old Testament lesson that we heard a few moments ago, and you might remember hearing something about a veil. As Moses led the people of Israel through the wilderness, as they were camped at Sinai, in the region near Sinai, Moses went up on that mountain to speak with God. God gave him the laws. He gave him the regulations the people were about to follow. And when Moses went, and he sat there in the radiance of God's glory, his face became radiant too. And so when he came back down, the people saw his radiant face and they said, Moses, you need to wear a veil because that brightness, that radiance, it's too much. It makes us afraid. It terrifies us. It is too much. And so Moses put the veil over his face to keep God's radiance that was reflecting from him separate from the people. And that's the rule. See, that's the rule. That's how it goes. We cannot be in the radiant glory of God. We cannot be in his presence. Nobody can. I suppose you could say Moses was the exception to the rule, but that's the rule. And our thinking would sort of go something like this. There is God's radiance. There is his glory. And here's mine. And my glory is nothing. See, my glory is the way that I disobey God's laws, rebel against them, and disregard his word. What I would call glory in my life is the way I treat others with apathy, disrespect. I don't care about their needs, and then even try to justify it in my mind, saying I don't have the means or the time to be able to do that. My glory is letting thoughts of anger or hatred sort of fester in my mind, all because somebody dared to make a mistake that affected me. My glory is the way that I speak without love, causing hurt and harm to the people in my life. That's my glory. And it's nothing but sin and shame. It is not glory at all. It's disgusting and vile. And because of that, I deserve nothing but punishment for what dwells in me. So how can I be in the presence of God's glory? How could I ever look at it? Because all it would do is remind me of how far short I have fallen from what God demands, from the glory that He demands that I live up to. All I do when I see that glory is think about how devoid of glory I am. How wretched a sinner I am in the presence of God. All that glory of God does is tell me I deserve His wrath and His anger. I deserve to be crushed and destroyed. I deserve nothing but the fires of hell. That's what the glory of God shows me. That's why it's so terrifying. That's why we can't look at it. That's why we can't be in the presence of it, because it destroys us. So no, we don't want to see God's glory. And we don't even want to see it reflected from somebody else, like the people of Israel saw it reflected from Moses. It's too much. Can't handle it. But in God's grand plan of salvation, this is kind of where it starts, isn't it? It starts with a need. We have this huge need because we are so far short of the glory of God. We don't match up. We only deserve punishment. We need somebody to save us. We need somebody to intervene. In the grand plan of salvation, it begins with the fact that we who have no glory cannot save ourselves. We cannot gain that salvation by anything that we do, not on our own. We recognize our need. We see where we stand before God. And so in the grand plan of salvation, the next step is for God to supply our need. We need someone or something to intervene. So God sent someone to intervene, and he sends himself. What an amazing thing that is, that God sends his Son, who is God, in every possible way, who has all the glory that God has. But he doesn't come with that glory visible for all to see, because that would defeat the purpose. If we saw that glory as he comes to the earth, we would be afraid, we'd run away from him, we would be terrified of the punishment that he comes to bring. So no, Jesus comes with all of that glory, but it is veiled. He drops a veil over it. He sets that glory aside. He does not make full use of his divine power and glory as he comes to save us. But you see, in his glory, he fulfilled every single one of God's commands. He did all the things that we couldn't do. All the things in our lives that were the opposite of glory, that was his glory, that he obeyed God's laws. He took God's laws seriously. He cherished God's word in his life. He used whatever means he had to care for the needs of others, both physically and spiritually. And there were nothing but thoughts of love in his mind, nothing but words of compassion and instruction that came from his mouth. He did all of this, achieving the glory of God by his act of obedience, his lifelong act of obedience. So he did all of those things that we couldn't do for ourselves. See, he met that need. Where we fall short, Jesus made it the whole way. That's the glory of God. And so in the grand plan of salvation, this becomes the next thing. That Jesus meets the need we have. All of our needs are taken care of. Or at least up to this point. There's more coming in a little bit. And in the grand plan of salvation, God makes sure that he leaves us with zero doubts. Now here finally, after I've been talking for so long, here's finally where we come to the transfiguration and to that amazing event that happened on top of that mountain. Jesus went up there with his disciples to pray, and Luke records that this happened. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. The veil that Christ wore, the veil of human flesh that was his, that hid that glory, that veil is lifted. For a moment, a glimpse of his glory is given for his disciples to see, for us to see in the pages of Scripture. We see the glory of God, and we see that he comes not to destroy, not to judge us, but to save us. It is the glory of his grace, his forgiveness, his love. And we see it there on the Mount of Transfiguration. No mistake can be made that this is Christ. He is. And as if that weren't enough, a voice spoke as the cloud enveloped him. The voice, the same voice that spoke at the very beginning of his ministry, at his baptism, it speaks now toward the end. And the message is the same. This is my Son whom I have chosen. Listen to him. God saying to the people, this is the one sent to intervene. sent to meet the needs that we have, sent to cover over our inability to achieve God's glory, even our inability to even look at it. He is the one, Christ is the one carrying out God's grand plan of salvation. And here he is at the Mount of Transfiguration, making sure that we know that. The veil is lifted for us to see he is the one whom God has chosen, so we have nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. The plan of salvation is coming to fruition. How necessary it was for that veil to be lifted. Because as Jesus and his disciples came back down the mountain, the veil would drop once more. That glory would be hidden. And it would be hidden as Jesus finished out his earthly ministry, as he made his way toward Jerusalem, as he entered into Jerusalem riding on a donkey. The glory would be hidden as Jesus ate with his disciples that Last Supper, as he went to the Garden of Gethsemane and prayed earnestly, and then as he was arrested and tried. The veil covers that glory as he endures physical and verbal abuse throughout all of this, as the crown of thorns was pressed upon his scalp, as a scourge was raked across his back, as that cross was placed upon him and as he stumbled underneath its weight, as he stretched out his hands on that cross, as his hands and feet were pierced with nails, as he was hung up there for all people to see, gasping for breath, giving up his spirit in front of the eyes of everybody. Yet the veil covered the glory, but make no mistake, Jesus is glorious. And there still is glory radiating from that cross, and glory radiating from his wounds. So that cross meets our needs because it is the punishment meted out for sin. Those wounds are the consequences of our wickedness, our inability to achieve God's glory. What Jesus suffered on the cross, when he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That's what sin requires. And Jesus endured it in our place. It should have been us. We are the ones who should have been punished. But Christ stepped in. He intervened. He received God's wrath. And so there on the cross, hidden as it is the glory of forgiveness, the glory of God's grace. And if for any moment we ever forget that, or if we fail to see it, we go back to the Transfiguration. We go back to that mountain, and there again we are made sure. As the veil is lifted, we see Christ in all his glory, and we know, yes, that is the one who pays for my sin. That is the one who conquers sin for me. And in the grand plan of salvation, Jesus meets our final need, because it doesn't end there on the cross. Everything that Jesus did, it didn't stop when he gave up his breath, because he took his life up once again. He rose from the dead and he conquered death for you and me. All because he is the glorious Son of God. This is what he has done. He's lifted that veil that separates God from us. We are on the cusp of the season of Lent. Ash Wednesday is just a few days away. And the season of Lent will end when the temple curtain is torn in two. See, that was another veil that separated God from the people. It was a curtain that hung in the temple that divided the holy place and the most holy place. It was a division between where the people could go and where God was, because you cannot be in the presence of God and live. But when Christ died, when he fulfilled all of God's laws and fulfilled all of God's wrath, when he took all of that for us, the veil was lifted. Or in this case, the temple curtain was torn in two. And no longer is there any separation between us and God, because there no longer needs to be. When Jesus endured that pain and that suffering, when he endured God's wrath on the cross, as he shed his blood, he was washing us, cleansing us. Sin covers us, and it is a veil that separates us. It is a barrier between us and God, but Jesus took it away. And so in the presence of God, we are holy, we are righteous, we are even glorious as He desires, as He requires that we be. Which means that when we leave this world and we leave the veil of our sinful flesh, we will stand before God and we will not be afraid of the glory that we see in heaven. We will bask in that radiance. And all of this because of Christ, the one who came for us, the one who lived and died for us, the one who was transfigured for us, all because of Christ, for whom the veil was lifted. Amen. Please stand. Now may the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, keep your hearts and minds through faith in Christ Jesus. Amen.